If God were to speak to me in a dream or something, and I can't test that again or have another conversation, I say to myself, well, that was a one-off, and that might have just been my brain relieving itself of pattern recognition. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the channel. I'm Don. You know the title of the channel, The Agnostic Philosopher, and I just recognize the limits of human knowledge. I have my own position on what constitutes certainty. I don't think we humans can be absolutely certain pretty much of anything, and I think the most basic one goes back to Descartes, where he was trying to prove in some way that he existed. And that was the most basic thing. Basically, if I'm talking, certainly there's got to be a me. And then he boiled it down to, I think, therefore I am. And even some folks have challenged that one. But he said, look, even if we're a brain in a vat, and this sensory perception and all these cognitive processes that I think I have, they're just the product of some evil scientist or maybe benevolent scientist or some being that's just pumping information into just a brain in a vat. Well, there's something that is still doing the thinking. If this information's being downloaded into my brain or uploaded into my brain, then there's still clearly a me, whether I'm conceptualizing the me, these arms and fingers may not exist. All these sorts of things, there's still something that exists. Well, we're in search of knowledge, epistemology ever since. Scientists go after it in the lab. They go after it with the telescope and testing. Sir Karl Popper's theory of falsifiability. Theologians will look at the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament or the Quran or the sacred texts in order to prove or support their ideas of what constitutes knowledge or truth. An agnostic myself says, yes, there are certain things that are more reliable than others, certain lines of reasoning that are more reliable than others. If every time I kick that rock, my foot hurts, over time I say it's pretty reliable that rock is bad for my foot when I kick it. So you just kind of live and learn. But there are limits to what we can and can't know. And that's where the agnostic comes down and says at some point, we can't prove God, we can't disprove God. It's simply that I don't know enough to say yes, absolutely, no, absolutely. So the word agnostic is like agnosis, basically. The Gnostics believe they could just inherently know by just from within and contemplation, that in a sense they were almost one with knowledge in the universe, that they just knew things. Those were basically the Gnostics in a nutshell. Agnostics are those who say, I don't have knowledge like that. I don't have knowledge, absolute certainty on things, and I'm comfortable accepting the limits of what I perceive to be my own abilities to think things through, to reason, and to make statements that reflect things that are always true. So theists claim to know that there's a God. Atheists claim to know that there isn't a God. And the agnostic is in the middle and says, look, I don't know enough to say there is or there isn't. So in that sense, we're very comfortable examining arguments from any realm of the world. Some of them are just idiotic, some of them in theology, like some analyses of the biblical texts. I, for one, when I look at the doctrine of the Trinity and dual nature of Christ and the torturous interpretations culled out from various verses in the Bible to support this notion of three persons in one God, each of whom is fully God, yet there's not three gods, there's only one God. There's just too much contradiction and room for error in that it pains me to hear that way of thinking. But I don't go so far as to say merely because that's a bad argument to me that therefore there's no God. That those two don't go hand in hand. So it's an employment of the use of reason, but within limits, such that we don't make claims of absolute certainty. And Voltaire had a great quote in this, and I'll read it to you. Voltaire was a French philosopher in the 1700s, and he said this: doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is an absurd one. And I love that. It covers it. Being absolutely certain suggests, wow, you've really covered all the bases. You see everything pertinent to whatever it is you're stating. There's no more information that could possibly come your way that could either support, enhance, contradict, or refine what it is you're thinking. You've got it all covered. And Voltaire says, that's absurd. And I say that as well. So even Dawkins himself, and I appreciate this about Dawkins too, where he said, look, I can't disprove belief in a God, or I can't prove that there's no God. Okay, all I can say is there's not enough evidence for me to go in the direction to believe in one. And that is a very fair approach to one's personal beliefs in a God or not in a God. Either way, that is a very fair, honest, open approach. You know, some things, we all have our own thresholds of proof, and some things to each of us are just more reliable than others. That was the basis, basically, for Sir Karl Popper's principles of falsifiability, where he said, look, we can't prove things. But what we need in science, he says, science is not about proving things per se. What constitutes science is the ability to falsify, to subject it to testing. So for example, could we test whether there's a Big Bang? No. In one sense, that would not constitute science. It doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile endeavor to look at the cosmic background radiation and all the other aspects that might point to it. But we can't yet subject that to a test. But we can see things in petri dishes. There are a lot of things that we can subject to testing that could possibly show what we believe to be false. And that gets into reliability. Some of our theories seem to be extremely reliable and useful. And those are the ones that we just rely upon more, the more they apply in multiple fields. In biology, botany, physics, chemistry, the more we have things that seem to apply broadly, those are more reliable. But it doesn't mean that they won't be shown to be false or in need of modification at some point. And that's where the agnostic comes in and says on everything, basically, look, I can't make a claim of certainty on a given thing, especially when it comes to something as big as belief in a God who really hasn't personally spoken to me. And even that might be subject to question if it was in a dream or somewhere. Like, all right, I've had wacky dreams before. Was that real? Like, we tend to like things that are a bit more concrete and perhaps even give us an ability to test them again. If God were to speak to me in a dream or something, and I can't test that again or have another conversation, I say to myself, well, that was a one-off, and that might have just been my brain relieving itself of pattern recognition, which is one of the theories of what happens and what causes dreams at night, or in the day for that matter, that pattern recognition disappears. And we're over here at the Great Wall of China, and then we're underwater in kindergarten, and then we're at Walmart, and then we're all over the place. And it's like the pattern that normally constitute our waking hours are broken down. But when it comes to belief in God, the Gnostics say, I just don't know. And Voltaire had another great quote relating to God, and I'll leave you with this. He said, if God created us in his own image, we have more than reciprocated. And what I especially notice in a lot, that is just brilliant. We've anthropomorphized God and this, but notice the if in that. If God created us in his own image. And I like that. He said, look, he clearly has read the text, in Genesis, the Bible book of Genesis, and he still leaves it in the contingency that, like, if this is true, which I'm not sure about, but if God did this, we certainly have taken things and run with it, and we've made God in our image. It's kind of funny how we assume he likes us. So anyway, all right, folks, have a great day. See you on another video, and keep thinking philosophically.